In the 1970s, two young psychologists did a fun experiment to explore the question, what motivates people to do hard things? Because many scientists and psychologists has thought that motivation was mainly driven by incentives like reward and punishment. But the experiment result showed otherwise. So they did experiment in Carnegie Mellon University. He asked people to solve puzzles. It's called Soma Cube. Those who were offered a financial reward by solving the puzzle were weirdly less likely to enjoy the task and were more likely to give up solving the puzzle if the rewards are removed, compared to who weren't offered any money or any rewards at all. So the hundreds of the results has shown that the rewards seem to make people less engaged with a task. Later, this psychologist, also scientist, has found it is the self-determination theory from the intrinsic yourself that actually motivates you from going forward instead of any extrinsic awards or punishment. They encouraged readers to see motivations of failing on a spectrum with the extrinsic at one end and intrinsic in the other. Intrinsic motivation comes from the inside, curiosity, a genuine desire to learn, to grow, and to better their life. And versus extrinsic motivation comes from the outside, is driven by pay rises, material rewards, and social approval, where no matter how high you get, you will never get enough, and you will never think you're good enough by comparing yourself to other people. But these forms of motivation were not equal. So according to the self-determination theory, intrinsic motivation is substantially more efficient and powerful than extrinsic motivation. And lasting motivation comes from within. So in their later research and experiment, they were demonstrating that intrinsic motivation can be enhanced by a handful of forces. Chief among them are a sense of autonomy. Wait, why do I sound so British? Autonomy. So in their paper, they call this term the sense of ownership. So we can actually equate these two concepts together with the concept of ownership and autonomy. So when I read their paper, I actually pulled out this chart of how the motivation spectrum work between the extrinsic and intrinsic. So where I found, there's many external spectrum motivation comes from rewards, punishment, the so-called social status approval, performance goals, set by the KPI and stuff. And the part where intrinsic motivation works better and works more internally and powerful includes self-fulfillment, curiosity, learning, the willing to open your heart to new things, and for personal growth. So you can actually align your goals, your personal values onto these different categories and see if your motivation comes from intrinsic, or extrinsic. So here is where the sense of ownership comes from. What makes the concept of the ownership and autonomy so powerful is that you can integrate it into almost every scenario. And all too often when we find ourselves in a situation that we don't like, we start feeling fatalistic. Like, I don't like where I live, but it's not in my power to move. I don't like where my relationship or my marriage is going, but it's not in my power to alter it. I find this work is super boring, but it's not in my power to change it. Sometimes we are right. There is nothing we can do, but often we have more agency than we thought it could be. If not over the whole situation, then over parts of the situation. And we actually have control when we don't know it. Then I've learned the sense of agency and the sense of autonomy can actually be gained by converting have to into choose to. Have to is really coercive language that makes you feel powerless. But if you convert it into choose to, it's a more autonomy affirming language that makes you more powerful. I finished Viktor Frankl's the Austrian psychiatrist and also the survivor of the Auschwitz concentration camp during World War II. He put it in this way very beautifully where he says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.